Hey everybody, it's Ken McElroy here. I'm here with Anthony and John. What's going on, guys?
Doing well, how are you?
Good. They're with Cornerstone Investments, and they do multifamily, so very similar to us, but a lot younger. You guys, I'm like, wow, you were only doing residential sales for a couple of years each, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So was this something that you had a strategy on from the time you came out of college?
So for me, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad when I was a freshman in college, and every single internship I do, I listen to podcasts. And one of the biggest things that I remember Brandon Turner saying was, I wish I would have gone bigger sooner.
You know, the reality check, right? From selling, basically commissioned sales to, go out and finding deals, putting together the deals, raising capital it's like the Grand Canyon in between those two, right? So how did you do that?
It's a good question. So my dad and I actually started the company together. What the problem was finding the sellers, because if you've got the sellers but you don't have the capital, you got to piece those two together. And so we knew that the best way for us to start was probably just doing development. So that's how we kind of started our business, was based on development deals. Through the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, they formed opportunity zones, and that really spurred a lot of opportunity for us in our development business because of the tax advantages and opportunity zones.
Yeah.
So we ended up getting into 3 of those opportunity zones, and that really helped jumpstart a lot of the capital raising, because it opened up a lot of avenues for investors. Because a lot of the investors that we work with are retirees. They may have an IRA or cash, but a lot of them that want to invest in real estate, they want to buy something, but they don't want to do the property management. They just want it to be a passive investment for them.
Are you doing mostly in the Idaho area, opportunity zones?
Yeah, so we're actually in 3 different states. So we're over in Oregon, near Bend and Redmond, Oregon, and then we're in Missoula, Montana, and then in Coeur d'Alene, or it's actually Post Falls, where the opportunity zone is there. So we've got projects in all 3 of those, all ground-up development.
What obstacles, though, like specific? Like what things, have you guys had anything happen that was kind of like you had to scramble, or it was a learning lesson?
The biggest one, we were talking before we started here, about costs. Costs have gone up astronomically, and the pandemic, with our markets, has really just set it on fire. A lot of people have moved to our area. With that comes a lot of challenges, and costs have been one of those. We actually had to do our first capital call this past year, and costs went up with the city, basically being out of the office for 4 or 5 months, going through the entitlements and approval process, and all of a sudden we realized we didn't raise enough money for this. That was our biggest challenge we've had so far in our business.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you for saying that and being honest about it, because I've had to do those. They're not easy.
You got to go through the entire underwriting process again, and you got to prove to all of your investors again and say, look, the property that you invested in before is still worth what we're saying it's worth, because the rents have changed.
Well, we talk about that a lot. A lot of people, I think, right now that are building could be in trouble.
And we've pivoted. I mean, that was one project. Now we have other ones we're building, and we just switched to raising up 40 to 50% equity on all of our builds now, and putting in a lot bigger contingency line items to make sure that we're covered. Don't have to do that again. And they still pencil well. Everything really pencils well. So that's
equity. What I wanted to hear from you guys is, what was it like tying up a piece of land, young guys, and then going into a lender? Because that, right? Because they're like, who are you guys? And you've never built anything, and do you have the equity together? The list that the lender. What was that like?
So my dad was a commercial banker for a lot of years, so he kind of has that experience in financing. So we were the guys that were just like finding the deal, working it constantly. But the nice thing about it was having him check through it all and say, hey, this is what needs to work, because he's underwritten these deals before, and what it needs to look like, especially in front of like Fannie Mae, where they're going to underwrite that deal, and if it doesn't look perfect, they're going to say no.
That's right.
It goes back to why business partners are so important.
Yeah,
I mean,
I was gonna say that.
we're young guys, and we understand that, exactly what you said. If we walked in there just John and I without John Sr., they probably would have laughed us right out the door. But we have a third business partner who's experienced in this, and we go in there and they have a little bit more trust in us. And my encouragement to anyone young is that's possible for anyone. There's someone in your network, I can almost guarantee it, that
That's right.
has that experience or has the net worth that can help back you on your first deal. Maybe you give them 50% of the deal and they're making more money than you, but just to get you started, that's more important.
That's what I did. I like give that away.
Yeah,
because you're going for the learning at this point.
Yeah,
right?
we still give a lot away to our regional partners and stuff. I mean, I wouldn't even say give it away. The opportunities wouldn't exist without them.
Correct.
So that's why.
That's a better way to say it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I think that the team is out there. Mm-hmm. You can assemble it, and if you could just get a little piece for putting it all together, right?
If I had any advice for someone that's thinking about this and thinking about having a partner, don't find a partner that might just be the best broker in town. Find someone that you align with on values. You're going to do better than finding the best broker in town that's been selling all these deals and has all this network. That person could be shady, and that could take your whole business down.
All right, so you got John Sr. as the hidden, as the secret weapon. So now let's talk about the equity.
Yep.
Yeah.
So by the way, somebody like John Sr. is important because they package it up and get it ready, and he already knows what the questions are going to be on the debt side. Now you're going out to the equity side, right? Mm-hmm. And so you got, Wall Street all the way down to Main Street, right? So how did you do that?
We first started, our first syndication deal was actually in a town called Lolo, Montana. It was just south of Missoula. And we knew that we had the right team in place, and we ended up, the builder actually carried the land. He said, I own this land. If you guys are wanting to be my buyer, I'll sell it to you built. And so that was actually a really nice thing to find. And what people might not realize is that a lot of builders actually own land themselves.
Yep.
And they might not want to do the deal because the best thing about builders is they always want to find another deal. And we had a few months to start the networking process and working with investors, and a lot of them, like I was saying earlier, they're local people. They're local real estate investors actually that had single family homes or duplexes, but they're retired now and they want to spend their time retiring and living off of cash flow.
That's right.
And not managing property.
Yep.
Even if they have a single family home in our area, that single family home went way up in value. So. A lot of the times they ended up selling that project and saying, well, I still want to be in real estate because it's my area, I know it's blowing up, and I still want to be a part of it, but I don't want to manage it, and I just want to be an LP. So
I'd rather cut up the deal, give you guys a piece, and then just meet with you once a month.
Well, the other thing that we do with landowners, if they, someone we grow a relationship with and they own the land, is we can roll in their land as equity,
right.
Not make a capital event for them, give them equity in the deal so they're getting cash flow. So it's kind of a win-win situation for both parties. They didn't have the capital to build, a $15 or $20 million project. We have the capital partners, and, they get $1 million or $2 million in equity that cash flows as long as we have the project. And, if they're a good landowner, they're a good person. We try to vet that to make sure that we want to deal with them type idea. But if they are, then we'll do that as well. And that's really beneficial because taxes right now are killing a lot of people, and finding a new exchange property is even harder right now in our markets just because of the out-of-state money coming here.
That's a good strategy.
Yeah.
We've done that in the past. Where, for those of you guys don't quite understand what Anthony meant is. Essentially, maybe somebody's got $2, $3, $4 million in a piece of land, and if they sell it, they've got a big capital gain. So you can take it, roll it in, and then you can make them part of the equity contribution, and then they can, when the thing's built, you can do a cash out refinance.
Yep.
So they've got their money out, tax free, and they own a piece of the deal, and they've got their equity. All you got to do is get in the business, and there's so many things, especially in these opportunity zones. By the way, these cities love this redevelopment.
Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, you can take capital gains from anything, and not today, but cryptocurrency. People have been making so much money from cryptocurrency. You can exchange your gains from crypto into an op zone. I mean, what else can you exchange? Or it's not an exchange. You're just taking your gains and putting them in there. But there's no other real way to take your gains and put them in real estate. From a non-real estate asset, and so that's been really beneficial as well to our investors.
Let's talk a little bit about interest rates because we have 6 ground-up development projects. So I'm dealing with the same kind of stuff you guys are, and we have the rising costs of construction, the rising labor costs, and now the rising borrowing costs. What are some of the strategies that you guys are concerned about or considering?
Sure, we actually have a meeting with our lender on Wednesday to go over some new strategies, new debt options, but it's definitely a concern. I mean, especially if they hit, right now they're 5%, they could hit 6% by the end of the year with what the Fed's telling us. And luckily, we have pretty high cash flow. We like to call it, we sandbag our returns from the get-go.
Yep.
So we can kind of, we've been able to navigate it right. Maybe we go down a half a point in the cash on cash because of that, but we've been able to navigate it really well so far. But we actually just had to turn down a project in Redmond in an op zone because just the cash on cash wasn't high enough with the new interest rates. We had it under contract, and then 3 months later the rates go up, and we're still in the due diligence period, and so we had to pull out of it because we weren't going to give our investors a good enough return. So
there's also a gap. I feel like right now we're in that kind of gap period where the sellers are kind of still riding that market high,
Yeah.
and they kind of haven't gotten, they haven't gotten the haircut ask yet when they say, oh, by the way, interest rates went up 0.5 point, a couple weeks ago, so we're just gonna either you come down or we're not gonna close. And I think that's going to be an interesting. I think throughout the summer we're going to see a lot of sellers kind of take the reality check. So that's kind of one of the things too, is kind of letting sellers, maybe even waiting a little bit and watching this happen, and maybe just giving a little bit of time and watching the sellers kind of take the dose of reality pill for a little while and let them kind of come down and realize.
Yeah, sure. Glad you came down. Thanks for joining
Absolutely.
us. Thanks for spreading some good wisdom for the channel, and we'll see you guys this summer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
All right. Cheers.